So I feel pretty confident that the medium-term prospects for the U.S. economy will leave the unemployment rate above, or in the best case, at the level it tended to be in the mid-1990s, before the internet boom and before the housing boom. This would be an unemployment level about 5.5%. Of course, we can be sure that whatever the number is, it won't be 5.5. It will be something quite different, but that's sort of an average of the possible scenarios. Okay, now coming to monetary policy. For a couple of decades, we've been accustomed to interpret monetary policy in terms of the Taylor rule. It was originally put forward by John Taylor, who was sort of a protege at Columbia University in the 1970s, put forward by Taylor as a description of what is, more than what ought to be. But the thing about the Taylor, and you know, let me just remind you what the Taylor rule says. It says, you got to think about setting a target, you got to think about establishing, for this month anyway, establishing a certain expectation about the real rate of interest. And you want that expected real rate of interest to be above or below what you think is the natural level of the expected real rate of interest, depending on a couple of things. And one is, what's the unemployment rate in relation to its natural level? The natural unemployment rate in some medium-term future, medium-term natural. And what's the inflation rate in relation to the target inflation rate? But this rule has no operational significance without specification of how two of its crucial elements are. It depends on how you estimate those two things. And that depends in turn upon how you think about how the economy determines those two things. As I see it, the Federal Reserve is not thinking right about the natural rate of unemployment rate. It is almost some constant of nature. In any case, they seem to think that it is well below the present level, which at last report was 5.5%. That's a bad number because there was a seasonal adjustment last month. Tomorrow, we'll get a number for the unemployment rate. It might be sharply lower, like 5.3. But that won't mean that the economy is now turned around. That will just mean that the mistake made in the last report became evident. The Taylor rule would have a central bank respond to unemployment being above the natural level, which that's respond to that with a cut of interest rates, cut the policy interest rate. In the United States, that's the federal funds rate. And the thinking is, it's not just the blind application of a mechanical rule. It says, oh, if the unemployment rate is above its medium-term natural level, you ought to cut. It says that in the book. That they also, behind that is sort of the philosophy of the Taylor rule, and that is that if the unemployment rate is above the medium-term natural level, then it'll be going back down sooner or later thanks to market forces, but we can help it get back down faster. We can speed up. We can foreshorten the rise of unemployment. We can cut short the deviation from the medium-term natural rate, and we can speed the return of the unemployment rate to its natural level by having real interest rates that are lower than we would otherwise have put them at. For example, by having real rates that are lower than the natural. Now, some of you may be saying, well, look, isn't it the case that the Fed's, the cuts in interest rates last fall were driven by a gut feeling at the Fed that banks might collapse if rates were not cut. And we often read in the papers that the statement that we need low interest rates so as to preclude increased foreclosures on homes, where which the borrowers can't any longer service the. But what they're saying is, in effect, that we're just in a temporary lull in activity. Don't worry, we're going back to the good old days with a low, structurally determined level of unemployment rate. And if we can just get out of this bad patch quickly, we can stop certain foreclosures from ever happening. But of course, if you think that the medium-term structural unemployment rate is, say, 6% or 5.5%, then you will think, well, there are going to be a certain number of foreclosures that are going to happen because employment's going to be low, unemployment's going to be high, real interest rates are going to be whatever they have to be to fight inflation, so you're only postponing foreclosures by having a period of low interest rates. If in truth the medium-term unemployment rate, the medium-term natural unemployment rate is actually above or at the current unemployment rate, then we're not going back to the old. So, to repeat, the Fed's rationale for keeping rates low appears to be fundamentally the feeling that the low rates serve to cushion the economy against what would otherwise be a worse trough or low, as the economy works its way out of temporary problems before heading back joyously to a medium-term natural unemployment rate that is about as low that is still quite low and much lower than the current level. But if one believes, as I do, that the forces driving the rise of the unemployment rate are structural forces, and that most or all of these forces will not turn around and not go into reverse, then it is not clear, at least not clear to me, what the rationale is for setting rates at unusually low levels. Now, you might say, well, you must be thinking about inflation to the neglect of